Hey there, parents! We've got something incredible to share with you. Have you heard about Adapted Design? They're making a real difference for families with disabled children.
Absolutely. They're all about empowering you to adapt toys and products for your child's unique needs.
And here's the game changer. Their how-to book, Let's Adapt for Everyone. It's a guide to DIY adaptations, helping you save big on those expensive adapted products that oftentimes break the bank.
Imagine the joy of customizing toys just for your kids. Visit adapted-design.com and let's make every playtime extraordinary.
That's adapted-design.com because every child deserves a world of possibilities.
You're listening to the Bitching and Bolusing Podcast with Courtney and Brittany. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Bitching and Bolusing Podcast Season 2.
Yay! Welcome to Season 2!
Oh, my goodness.
Woo-woo!
So exciting. I'm just so excited to be back.
So excited. I mean, there's so much going on this season that I don't even know where to start. Well, I think first and foremost, we are just so super excited to have Wes on the team.
Yes!
Holy
Such a
cow.
big deal.
Oh my God, such a huge deal.
He is part of the Bitching and Bolusing team.
Oh my God, he totally is.
Yes. Yes. Wes can bitch with the best of us.
Yes. And we're loving it. We're here for it. We're super excited for everybody else to see what he's going to bring to the table.
Yes.
There's really just a lot of good stuff happening with him on the team with the second season. We've got our merch shop whole overhaul.
Oh
All
my
new
designs.
All new designs. We've got some really awesome stuff up there. We got YouTube going. We've got so much going on. I mean, so much more. I don't even want to spoil it.
I know.
All. So I'm gonna keep a little bit of it in my back pocket for a later discussion.
We have been busy.
Yeah, we have been really, really busy. And we've got some amazing guests coming on this season, which also deviates us a little bit. Me and Britt were having this discussion recently, and we wanted to preface this season a little bit about our guests, because I think sometimes having guests can muddy the waters as to what people may think about as what's our own personal opinions. Mm-hmm. And we want to talk about the fact that having some guests may be controversial, having some guests may bring up topics, or they may say things or have their own perspectives that doesn't 100% align with what me and Brittany believe or feel or perceive. And we just want to preface this season that, yeah, sometimes all seasons for that matter, sometimes we'll have guests that we think the topic is more important than
not
how they come off.
It. Yeah, or not
exactly.
talking about it.
We may not 100% agree with what is being said, but the topic at hand and the topic of the episode that we may be discussing with a guest is more important, and there's a bigger picture. And, there's some level of, almost documentarian, I would say, because we don't want to censor people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we should be avoiding topics simply because somebody who's discussing it may come off a certain way.
Yeah, and I think that it's also important to note that Courtney and I talk a lot about how a lot of the topics we discuss need to be discussed, and we're not gonna discuss it just to keep like the parenting community happy and comfortable, right? Yeah. And so I think that that's kind of like, we have to feel that too, right? So like, we have guests on that may have discussions with us that maybe make us think and self-reflect and and that's where, listen, we're all along for the ride together because
yeah. And we want diversity.
Yeah.
Like we don't want it to just be, a vacuum chamber of me and Brittany.
Yes. Yeah.
We're not trying to do that at all. The world is filled with a range of individuals. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important for when we do have guests, which the majority of our show right now is not filled with guests, right. But when we do have guests, we want a range of diversity. We do not want people to just come on here to toot our horns or vice versa. Mm-hmm. We want to talk about a lot of hard things, and sometimes it gets a little messy having guests, but we want you guys to keep an open mind and remember that just because we're having a guest doesn't mean we 100% agree with that person, and that's okay.
Yeah. And then, you guys can make your own decisions too.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's really about just us presenting topics and us presenting different point of view. And if you agree or don't agree, that's up to each individual person.
Yeah, we have plenty of people who don't agree with us, and we're okay with that. We are not everybody's cup of tea. We understand that. And, we all just go our separate ways.
Yes, it doesn't need to be, I guess more than anything, I'd hate for somebody to be like, I didn't like that episode with that guest. Like, I'm cutting all of you off. Yeah. Just remember, we're here to put out different point of views just as much as anything else that we're doing. So,
and we like to be challenged too.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Exactly.
I like challenging myself.
Yeah, Courtney and I challenge each other constantly.
Yes. It's so true. So, now that we kind of got all that, welcome to season 2 stuff out there. Welcome to season 2.
Welcome to season 2.
This is episode number 1 of season 2. Today, we're going to bitch about special education. Not necessarily special education in a general sense. I would say it's more inclusive education and this kind of resistance to it.
I think it's inclusive education, and I think it's inclusiveness as a whole, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of like outside of the education department.
Yeah. Little bit of education, little bit of not, okay? We're going to have it all today. So let's do some bitching. If we're going to at least start with the idea of discussing inclusive education aspect, right? God, inclusive education is so complex and so goddamn infuriating.
Oh, and gross and messy.
Oh my God, I can't stand it. Right? When I tell you the bane of my existence is dealing with schools, IEPs, I if there was one thing I could just fucking do without, I swear to God, that would be on the top of the list.
Which is crazy because our kids are new to the whole school thing, right?
I know. We haven't not even been doing this very long. I know. And I already don't want it.
Oh my God, we're done.
Holy shit. I'm in pre-K 4 here. I've only been doing it a full year.
Yeah.
And I am done.
Done.
I'm so done with it. I am so over it. I'm so over with just advocating the most basic, simple things. And just to give a little bit of an idea of the challenges that I'm currently facing with it and what I've been advocating for in regards to Lino and his schooling experiences, Lino goes to a specialized school. So in Lino's case, I've come to this sort of realization, because I think at the beginning when I sent Lino to school, a lot of it was so much anxiety about detaching from Lino, putting Lino out there without having his primary caregivers. That was really fucking scary. And I think that applies to all children, right? I think I'm going to equally go through the same thing when I do this with Luca.
Yeah.
When you have that initial sending away, it just is riddled with so much anxiety. And then you add on the medical complexities are terrifying. I would worry about seizures. I would worry about all these things that I was just but he needs his mom there, because who wouldn't want their mom if you were having something medically happen to you? You would want, or your dad, you would want your parent, right?
Yeah.
So there was so much anxiety about that. So when we initially started this whole going to school thing, we were just okay, the district placed him out of district to go in a specialized school, and I almost felt safe with it.
Yeah.
You know what? This makes me feel so much better.
Yep.
Because he's going to have his own nurse, plus there's 2 nurses on site, plus every adult in that building is going to have some experience on some level with some of his medical conditions or all of his medical conditions. And they're going to know how to interact with him. They're going to know how to help him excel. Like I rationalized everything I could about this whole situation, and it made me feel so much better about it. I was just like,
yeah,
awesome. Like this is the best thing I could do for Lino. And we're a year in now, and now it's at the point where I am questioning that, because I have come to this realization of segregation is not equality. And I've said this before in regards to his schooling experience, because how is it inclusive education if he's not included? And I'm dead ass serious with that question. I don't understand that concept. And this is not even, there's even more levels. This is just our personal experience. Like, Lino is completely not included at all, if you really want to look at it realistically.
and it's like crazy, because I remember you and I having way back when these discussions, and I remember you like really kind of struggling, because and it's so funny because we were opposite, because you really wanted Lino to go to public school.
Oh my God,
initially.
Yeah.
I really wanted Cyrus to go to a specialized school. And it's so funny that because you were like talking to me, and I'm like, oh girl, that's like, like that's what we want.
You were like, wow.
You're like, can we do that?
I know.
Like, we were really trying to, like, encourage our district, like, you can't meet his needs, come on, like, ship him up, right? And so there was, like, this whole for us, and I think that this is where it's really tough for parents, because the reality for us is that a specialized school is going to be significantly more equipped to handle children like ours with higher needs, right? Like, they're just going to be equipped. They've done it. They've been doing it.
I will never deny that. Like, for sure.
Like, they've got, like you said, like, the nursing staff. They probably have, like, equipment clinics that, you know, like, and they probably have better equipment there. And, you know, like, they probably have better funding and all this. And so, like, that's where, like, this, like, push and pull is really tough. Because
it's really tough.
For me, I was like, well, yeah, obviously I want Cyrus to fucking go to a specialized school, because the one that we have, like, they have fucking, like, a pool for, like, aqua therapy. Like, that's amazing. Like, of course I want him to do that. Like they have speech therapists that are, like, they know their shit about AAC. Like, of course I want him to be exposed to that, right? But then there's, like, that reality of, like, well, he's going to be surrounded by all other children that have disabilities. And so this is where it's tough, because there really needs to be that balance of, like, your child really shouldn't necessarily be the only disabled person in the room all the time. But there's also, like, there needs to be that interaction with other disabled kids. But when it's exclusively only other disabled kids, like, they're missing out on a whole aspect of society that they're going to age into. Like, they're not coming out of school, you know, for the most part. Like, they're going to interact with society. Like, I'm sorry, it's just how it is. They go to a doctor's appointment, guess what? Like, the whole staff at the doctor's appointment's not disabled. You know what I mean? And that's...
It's not realistic. It's not realistic. Like, when you think about, it's the opposite end of the extreme, right? Like, we don't want our disabled children to just be thrown into general population and have no support for any of their needs, right? Like, that's a fucking nightmare. That's literally what my nightmares are made out of. Is, like, Lino just stuck in a classroom and nobody's paying attention to him, right? Like, that's literally a nightmare. But on the other end, the extreme of the opposite is also kind of a nightmare, is not having him have a realistic experience of school, number one, right? Because when I think about what school was like for me, I don't expect it to look the same for Lino, but the experiences of it, I would want that still for him. I would want him to have friends of all different varying abilities. I would, of all different cultures, of everything. Like, I want that diversity for him, because that's what I was able to experience. Why can't he experience it? I want him to have that socialization. And I want school to prepare him the same way school prepared me. And I've had this discussion with you, Brittany, because this was my big thing in the beginning about why I always kind of wanted him in public school, was the concept of, how am I going to teach him how to advocate for himself in society if he doesn't experience the injustices of society?
I know. And that's so tough.
And that is not to say that I want him to experience these injustices or that I want him to suffer in any way. But if he does not get to see me model advocating for his rights and for himself, how is he going to learn that? He can't learn that if he's in a bubble. Even then, in a specialized school, his needs are not always met. And I'm still advocating there too, right? Like, I'm not saying you go into specialized school and that's just fucking perfect.
Yeah.
Advocacy is always ever present, especially in the school system. But if he's always surrounded like, oh, no matter what situation I'm in, I have all the equipment I need, I have all the access I need, he's not going to realize that the world is actually not like that. It's not fucking like that.
No. It's not. This is where it's so tough, right? Because I see both polar opposites within the parenting community.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult because there are pros and cons to each side, right?
Of course,
and so, like,
100%.
One thing that I'm seeing now, right, because we have made a huge shift, especially within, like, the education system, to try to shift to, like, inclusive classrooms. But that can be really fucking tricky because now you have a public school system, right? And I've heard from therapists, one of Cyrus's early intervention therapists told me, she was like, these teachers are not fucking equipped. Like, they're now doing inclusive classrooms in public school. She's like, and then you sit there and you have 10 kids with disabilities in one classroom that, like, there's maybe one aide, you know? Like they're not equipped to handle that. So there's that, right? But then I'm seeing the other end of things where parents are hyper-focusing on inclusivity while excluding the disabled community.
Oh my God, yes.
And that's really tough because it goes back to me saying, like, your kid should not be the only disabled kid in the room in every situation. And a lot of times parents are putting their kid as the only disabled kid at the table. Right? And that's really not okay either because these children need to be exposed to peers of all abilities, like you said. So it's like, it's so hard to find that balance. And, you know, I really think parents need to sit there and say, okay, if I send my kid to, you know, mainstream school, what's that look like for them? Are there other disabled children in their class? If not, like, what is their exposure to other disabled kids? Are they going to be doing, you know, services with them during, you know, the school day where they are exposed to other disabled children? Are they going to be able to foster relationships with other disabled children? And if so, how is that going to be encouraged for them within the school setting?
Yeah.
If that is not going to be encouraged for them within the school setting, if there's no possibility of that happening, of them really developing genuine relationships, how can I then foster that outside of school? That might look like adaptive sports, you know? Before Cyrus's OT had left the clinic that he's at, like, we would co-treat with another family. It turned into a play date for Cyrus, you know? And that was like a huge deal for him, you know? He really loved that because I think that there, you know, might be one other kid in his class that has an IEP, maybe two. I'm not sure. There may be more, but I do know that there is not another child in his class whose needs are as great as Cyrus's.
Yeah.
And so that's tough. You know, like he really needs to interact with peers that do have similar needs like him, do have similar disabilities like him, that can relate to things, you know? Like,
you want both. You really do want both. And it's really hard because I want to say, like, I'm not hating on specialized schools.
No.
I think they should exist. I would not say really anything bad about the school Leno's in. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have an issue with the school. I have an issue with the societal concept of every disabled person should be segregated because it's going to suit their needs better. I think that is problematic because I don't think that's 100% true. And I think that's what you're touching on because you really don't want either end of the extremes, right? You don't want completely no exposure to disabled kids. You also don't want overexposure to disabled kids and no exposure to able-bodied kids.
you also don't want your kid to be brought to the table as a teachable moment for non-disabled
100%.
kids, right? Mm.
A lot of it comes down to changing the school system. We're trying to find the right choice for your own disabled child is really putting more work on you to advocate, right? Because as a parent, you have to advocate for your child in the schools, right? Like that's what we have to do because they're children. And you always hope that schools are doing the best and the best intentions, but schools are schools and people are people and there's always something, you know? Like it's just the truth, right?
And there's money. There's all that money.
Even with your non-disabled children, you advocate in your schools. Right? Yeah. It's definitely different. And maybe they're not like these deeply rooted social issues that you're advocating for, but you're advocating for all your children in school if they're in school.
Right. Right.
And when there is disability involved, there's just more advocating because you will have to do more work. That's just the truth. Currently, Lino's in a specialized school and separated, and I'm constantly advocating, well, when's there an event where the schools are mixed? Because I know that his school does that. So, like, I'm constantly advocating even now for that. And then I'm going to have to do the same if he does ever end up in, like, our local public school. Like, it's just... the advocacy is never going to end. And I think it's a hot mess because you really are trying to balance so much shit. I certainly don't encourage people to just put their kid in like a local public school if there is no intention for that school to participate in trying to have your child be included and to help advocate for their needs. And if you're not going to take part in some serious advocacy. Don't do it because then your child is going to end up sitting in the back of the classroom and nobody's paying attention to them.
Yeah, and I think that advocacy is just going to look a lot different for each school system, right?
Oh, God, yes. And every school, not even just the school system. Every school is going to be so individualized as to how they handle your child or your case or your situation. Like we've been very fortunate. We started having discussions about transitioning Lino and our district has been really, really open to discussions. So we've been fortunate. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know what it's going to ultimately look like, but we have begun those discussions. But I'm sure, I am without a doubt positive that there are other schools and other districts that if I propose this, it would not go the way that it's currently going. Mm-hmm. It would be just a blockade of, no, we can't handle that. We can't do this. I think they're better suited here. This, and the other thing. Inclusive education, again, is just, it's such a challenge. And as parents, I swear we are just so fucking unprepared for this shit.
Oh, God.
How many times have I told you, like, I feel so inadequate.
Yeah.
There has never been something in my life that has made me feel more inadequate. And I mean that seriously.
Complete overwhelm.
Oh, my God. Like, when it came to medical needs, when it came, like, using a G-tube, there was this feeling of, like, oh, I don't know how. But I never felt so inadequate in my entire life. Like, I feel so ignorant. I feel like I don't understand. I feel like I am constantly challenged when it comes to it.
And I think that the huge issue for that is because we are so fucking out of the loop of what happens in those buildings, right? Yes. You have your IEP meeting, you sign off on it, everyone's on the same page. Okay, I don't fucking know. Like, unless Cyrus's nurse tells me what he did during the day, like, I don't fucking know.
Get yourself a good nurse.
Yeah, like, I have no idea. Like, I have a little journal that, like, she writes in to tell, like, recap the day. I have papers that each therapist has to fill out and his teacher and all that. But, like, Cyrus can't just come home and be like, oh, we sang this song today. And we did. And you're so far out of the loop. Like, it's to the point where I don't know the communication that goes on between each therapist. Now, think about that. Because I take Cyrus to outpatient services.
We know everything with all the other therapists.
Everything.
I know.
And they all communicate together, and they're all on the same page, and then they communicate with me, and they're like, oh, I was talking to so-and-so, we're going to do this together. And I have no fucking
No idea.
clue what
No
goes
idea.
in. So you can read every goddamn IEP book that's out there. You can hire every fucking advocate that's out there. You can do all of the fucking things, but unless you are a fly in the wall in your kid's classroom, you're not gonna fucking know. And that's why it's so overwhelming, because I can have every single person in that building say, yes, his needs are being met. I don't fucking know that. I'm not there. I can't see that. I would just have to go off of what people tell me. And guess what? Non-disabled people telling me that my kids are being met doesn't really make me feel like my kids are necessarily being met.
Does not make me feel good at all.
No, exactly.
No, and there's so many families that can't even get like a one-on-one, whether that's a one-on-one aide or a one-on-one nurse. And I feel like it's even sadder that we feel we need a one-on-one, because that's literally like, if you have a good one-on-one, they're almost like your ears.
They are.
The building.
Yes.
Your ears and your eyes and your ears, you know? And it's like, I feel comfortable in sending Lino to school because of his nurse.
100%. And I am pretty sure that's why Cyrus feels comfortable going to school.
Yes. Like without her, and we've had other nurses, and I gotta tell you, without his nurse, I don't know how I'd feel about all this. I don't know what I would do.
I know. I beg. Sorry. Every single day I'm like, please don't fucking go anywhere. Like, please follow this kid until he graduates.
Or just his whole life. I don't know. Maybe his whole life. I don't know. Just come live with us. It's really true. And I think that says so much, because think about that. If you have non-disabled children, think about that. You send your child to school and you generally feel comfortable.
Well, and they can tell you. I mean, for the most part, they can tell you, right? They can say, like, this is what I did today. Johnny called me this name. And you'd be like, well, I will fuck Johnny's parents up. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but you also feel like generally their needs were just being met, right?
Yeah.
Like they're just going to school and they're just getting everything they need, whether that's, educationally, whether that's socially, whether that's whatever, like you just feel comfortable. Everybody sends their kids to school and there's really no thought about it. Like, awful things sometimes happen and sometimes needs aren't being met. And I'm sure that's the case. But generally, you send your children off to school and it's like, oh, well, now they're at school. And you just kind of feel comfortable.
Yeah.
When it comes to disabled children and their parents and their caregivers, that is not the case at all. Ever. Name me one person who's ever just been like, yes, here's my disabled child, and felt comfortable. Yep. Absolutely not. There's so much shit that goes into it, and that's where that inadequacy comes into it, because it's like, holy fucking shit. Like, I never thought I would have to worry about all this shit, but this is a deep-rooted societal problem. How inclusive education is viewed, and how even the laws are in place for it are in many ways not creating inclusivity.
No. Well, because that would cost more money. But here's
money is a very big concern.
Yeah. And here's the other thing is like why Courtney and I are also touching on the whole like let your child foster relationships with other disabled kids, right? Because you can send a non-disabled child to school, and like Courtney said, like for the most part, needs are being met. But also, these children are able to meet their needs to some extent on their own. And a lot of that is socially, right? Socially, they can interact, similarly with their peers. Our kids aren't necessarily able to do that. And like, with Lino, I don't know if Lino's similar to Cyrus, but Cyrus has like a little bit of a delay when he responds to questions and answers, and sometimes he won't use his AAC device at all, but when he doesn't, I always try to tell people, like, we have the hand trick, like, this hand means yes, this hand means no, and give him a minute,
Yeah.
And kids don't have that patience at the end of the day, so, like, their kids aren't necessarily going to sit there and be like, okay, I'll wait for you to answer me. Like, kids are just kids. They just don't have that attention span. As an example, like, our children can't necessarily say, like, hey, I missed out on this, or hey, I wish I had more time with this friend. And one thing that we just encountered with Cyrus, and I wouldn't know unless his nurse was telling me, is that Cyrus has been having increased breath holding spells at school. And, like, it was going on every day. Like, she would be like, he had another one. He was really upset today. And I was the only one that really put the pieces together. And I asked him. And this is what's so frustrating is that I asked him. It really didn't take much. And I said, hey, Cyrus, I know you're having a hard time at school. Like, do you just not want to do therapy? Yes or no? He said no. And then I was like, are you being taken out of class for therapy? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, do you want to stay in class with your friends? Are you sad that you're having to leave your friends? Yes or no? Yes. He's upset that he's leaving his... That was it. I had a whole fucking conversation with my non-speaking child about why he's fucking upset at school.
3 questions and you got the whole answer.
That was it. I then went back to school and I said, hey, listen, let's try a few months of him doing his sessions in class minus speech. Like, speech, he should still get pulled out half the time, you know, to focus. Because that's a lot, you know, like, there's a lot of distractions.
Yeah.
This kid has not had a breath holding spell.
Yeah. Brittany, you're going to get the challenge that my kid can't verbalize or use AAC or say anything. Mm-hmm. And to that we say, perhaps then just troubleshoot. Perhaps then just think about what could my child be upset about. At the moment, my child is getting upset. What could it be? So, i.e., for example, from my perspective, it is way more difficult for Lino to communicate those sort of things very specifically. He struggles a lot. On a lot of things, he's bing, bang, boom. He will let you know immediately. But it is inconsistent as to how accurately he uses it. And that is because there's just varying degrees, right? There's varying things going on in that day, in that moment, how he's feeling, how exhausted he is. Exhaustion is a lot of it. If he's really tired.
Constipation?
Yes. I tell you, man. And I got to tell you, exhaustion is probably our biggest devil because when he's tired, it's just hard for him to do anything.
Yeah.
Like it really is. So from that perspective, sometimes it's just hard to get answers out of him. And I'm sure there's parents, I'm sure you feel that way sometimes with Cyrus, and I'm sure there's parents out there that feel that too, that it sometimes is not as easy as just asking my kid questions and getting the answers. And that's where you just have to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to be like, well, let's try this.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a week or two. If it doesn't work, let's try something else. Yeah. You know, bounce ideas off people. Sometimes I bounce ideas off Brittany. I'll bounce ideas off Lino's school team. Like, I'm like, what do you think about this? Like, maybe we could try this. Maybe just try it for a week. Try this. I'm bouncing ideas off all the time. And yes, a lot of it, especially right now, I feel in those early years when you first start sending your child to school, there's a lot of that. Because they're trying to find their footing in a completely different environment, and you're trying to find your footing, how to assist them and how to support them when they're not with you. Yeah. So there's a lot of trial and error.
To some extent, you can't necessarily blame the situation, right? Because, like, Cyrus's nurse knows him so well. But that's because he is the only child she has to focus on. He is the only child she's with. She's not paying attention to anyone else. She's paying attention. Yeah. She, like, let me tell you what, she has developed, like the same understanding to the level that I understand Cyrus. Like, it will be to the, it'll be
I have the
same
point, experiences.
Yeah, and it's to the point where, like, Cyrus will look at her, and that's all he has to do. And she'll be like, yep, nope, okay, we'll be done with this, you know? And you can't blame anyone else for not doing that, because, like, the teachers, the therapists, all, like, they have a whole fucking slew of kids going on that they have to deal with, you know?
Yeah. Because even the teachers, like, yes, the teachers see them the majority of the time, but they're still seeing them a small amount of time because the kids are constantly doing other stuff, whether they're in music class, whether they're in gym class, whether they're over here, they're doing that, and they have to focus on other kids and other tasks and other things. Like, yeah, I mean, when you have a one-on-one, that focus is so specific.
But so this is where it can become extraordinarily frustrating, right? Because you have one person in that building that fully understands your child's capabilities, almost to the point that you do as a parent, right? And so you have this one person that can vouch for you. You then have a whole slew of other people that will confront you and say, your child can't do this, we can't do that, they're not meeting these goals because they're not able to, and it's so fucking frustrating. It's so frustrating because the amount of time, like, I remember reading Cyrus's goals, and I hate goals, but they're necessary evil type of thing, and I was like, what the fuck are these? Like, he's already doing all of this shit. And then you run into this situation, like Cyrus and Lino, where these sassy little boys will not do something for the sake of not doing it.
Oh,
like
God,
how
yes.
many times? Oh my God, fuck Cyrus.
The stories I get of Lino actively not doing something simply because he's asked to do it.
Yes. Cyrus too. Like, they are so fucking, and Lino and Cyrus are very similar in the fact that, like, Cyrus will not do something because he knows if he doesn't do something, people will assume he can't do something. And so he gets out of it. Yeah. He gets out of it.
It's almost easier.
And then he's like, bitch, make me. You can't. Like, I'm telling you. Like, this kid has figured out the fucking system.
They're always underestimated, Britt. They really are, because they're way better at understanding and manipulating than I am.
Yes.
Like, I'm not even kidding. They're such typical toddlers from that perspective. The way they manipulate. I'm like, dude.
Yes. Cyrus will do it in physical therapy. He will just be like, I am not going to turn my body on, and you are not going to fucking make me, and we're just going to snuggle this whole session. So
this is my favorite story ever. Is Lito's old PT at school last year. She used to do an exercise where she would try to initiate assisted transfers from his wheelchair, and she'd be like, okay, Lino, on the count of 3, you're going to use your legs, and Lino would bust out fucking laughing.
Yeah.
He would just be like, ha, 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 belly laughs. And I'm like, that's because this kid's like, fuck you, I ain't gotta. You're still gonna pick me up.
Yep. Oh,
feisty buggers.
They are feisty buggers. They are. And then you sit there and, like, you know that, I know that, the nurses one-on-ones know that, right? And then you hear other people that are like...
Always underestimated. Always underestimated. That's one of the biggest issues as well with inclusive education is the stigmas and the underestimation, the preconception, right? We've touched on this in the fact of, like, how parents use social media to portray or show things about their kids, and how that can create stigmas to people who may work with them as well.
Yeah, yes.
There's a lot of preconceptions that as parents we're constantly fighting.
And it follows you. I mean, that happened. We had a listener reach out to us, and that happened to a child that she knows, where mom, dad posted a not so great picture and content of their child when he was much younger, all to raise awareness, and he's now much older, and his non-disabled peers, their parents found that content. And, and that can lead to bullying.
Yeah, that all happened in a school setting, that particular situation. And yes, it's
creates stigmas, bias, like
all of it. Yeah, like, I don't know the extent of that particular situation. We only got a glimpse of it from a listener that kind of gave us a little bit of insight on it. But there could easily be so many issues with that, because there is this element that we have to realize that, especially as they get older, and especially when social media starts to become in the picture of, preteens and teens in school, that is going to change the whole landscape for these kids. But it also does apply to even the educators and the therapists. We have therapists, like outpatient therapists, that follow us on social media, for sure. Like, I know that. And you do have to think about that, because if you're publicly putting out all this information, you may be doing the opposite of creating an inclusive environment, because you are going to create a bias or preconception, or, I mean, so many other things. And yeah, bullying is shit that I'm fucking terrified of.
Yeah, and I think that's why all of this kind of goes back to parents talking about, inclusivity and not fostering what true inclusivity looks like, right? Or
Yes.
inclusion looks like. Like, they're not necessarily fostering. I get it. Like, parents are fucking working their tails off to have their kids included in school settings, outside of school settings, this and that. But then not even realizing, wait a minute, my kid has no disabled friends.
Yeah.
Right?
Where's their community?
Yeah.
Because their community does exist. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and this also harkens to the internalized ableism kind of argument too, because we're almost creating this narrative that they need to be included with non-disabled individuals at all points and forever and always. And that's not the point. It really is more just having them be able to participate in everything else just like anybody else. I love the fact that Lino is surrounded by disabled children in the school he's in. I do love that because Lino gets to see that, yes, there are other people like him because he doesn't often get to see that at all.
I know. Yeah. Yep. You have the other side of the coin that's a lot of times for children like ours, right? We are their lifeline almost to their friendships, right? And how many times do you... And here's the thing. I am like as introverted as they come. I go to pick up and I'm like, nobody look at me. I do not exist. The only person I talk with is a grandmother. Like, she's my people. That's it. I'm like... super chummy with one of the girls' grandmothers, and like we sit and we chat, and like, you know, and Cyrus is actually really good friends with her in school, with the little girl in school. Like, she's one of his best friends. But like outside of that, I'm like, I don't want to fucking talk to anybody. But I also am getting to the point of realizing I'm gonna have to talk to parents.
Yes, you are.
You know, totally. Because like I'm gonna have to be the one that's like, you know, if Cyrus asks like, "Hey, can I see my friend?" Like, I'm gonna have to be the one to like.
I know. You know? it's like forcing me to be an extrovert. And I'm like, no.
I know. And,
why?
And you think about that, and I have dropped the ball so many times with helping Cyrus maintain friendships. And I know, like, you know, he's only in preschool part-time, and, like, that's gonna look a lot different once he's in school full-time, and, like, he's got his... Because, you know, a lot of the class that he's with now, like, they're not going with him to kindergarten. They're gonna stay back, and all... So, like, it's gonna look a little different next year. I have dropped the ball so many times on, like, helping this kid maintain certain friendships outside of school, therapy, all that. Like, and a lot of that is, like, one, I'm overwhelmed. I just don't have time. Two, I'm an introvert. I don't want to fucking talk to anybody. You know? And, like, that's a lot, but, like, whether it's a disabled peer or a non-disabled peer, like, that, a lot of that, maintaining that friendship falls on parents. Yeah. And it's like, let's add one more fucking scoop to the plate. But, like, it's challenging. We have to realize that, like, we are that lifeline, and we have to do it for the benefit of our kid, because we can't just help develop these relationships for the benefit of us, because that happens a lot, right? Like, the parents, I'm in the parenting community, and I really like this mom, and this and that, and then our kids interact, and, like, if we're looking for our own community as parents to feel a sense of belonging, we have to foster that for our kids without the direct benefit of us. You know? I
think it can be tricky sometimes, but I think you're right in the sense that should never be the primary focus when it comes to your children's socialization.
And I don't even necessarily know that is the primary focus. I think it just, like, naturally falls into place that, like, as parents with disabled kids, we find our community also has disabled kids, and then the relationships can build from that. I'm saying it's, like, the next step even beyond that. You're not looking for parents necessary. You're looking for other kids for your kid to play with. You know what I mean? Like, get them involved in adaptive sports. Get them involved into, like, adaptive, you know, outside of school things. You know, there's sports, there's music stuff, there's, I mean, gosh, you found one that was like a dance class, right? Like, I remember you sent it to me and you're like, we should do this. And I was like, oh my God, this sounds like I cannot be an introvert. I don't want to do this, but I will for my kid. And then that fell through. But like, there's so many things that our kids can participate in with other disabled kids. There's so many things they can participate in with non-disabled kids. And yeah, like fostering those relationships can be really tough.
It can be. I mean, I think I struggle with the same exact thing. So I totally get it. Like I personally would rather not socialize.
Yes. Yes.
But like, I know that for both my children, it is to the benefit of them, not for me. So I have to force that.
But it's so hard. I know.
Yeah, I have to force it. I have to force to push myself out of that comfort zone. I guess if we're going to talk about takeaways from this episode, is inclusive education in the school system is complicated. It needs an overhaul. We need to advocate for a lot of changes. It involves a lot of advocacy on the part of parents for sure, but you have to look at your child and see what their needs are, see what suits them better, because there's certainly children that will thrive and have a better schooling experience being in a specialized school versus a public school. So it's important to recognize that.
And then there are some that thrive in a mainstream school.
Exactly. And it's tricky because it's hard to try not to impose your own wants and desires. There is no right or wrong answer here. There really isn't. This conversation is meant to just challenge the ideas of what to just simply accept, right? Because we're so quick to just accept it. And I think that's dangerous. And I think if we're going to really foster inclusivity, we have to think about it from so many different angles. Like, you have to think about, are you excluding them then from their own community of disabled individuals? There's a lot of stuff here, and it's okay to feel a little lost in it all. It's okay to feel overwhelmed with all of this, because hot damn, I'm fucking overwhelmed.
Yeah,
I'm overwhelmed.
And also, like, another takeaway is just, like, don't have your child be a teachable moment.
Yeah.
They're not a teachable moment for anyone. You know, don't look at inclusion in that way. You know, like, that's not inclusion.
No. You can think about how it may benefit somebody who's not disabled, but that should never be the primary goal.
No, exactly. Well, this was a doozy. Happy first episode, guys. Needless to say, Courtney and I are still lost in the school IEP system.
Oh,
so,
God,
you know, we're just working through it all with you guys, too. So, but I will say, if any of our listeners have some, like, excellent IEP advice or suggestions, send them our way. Because we're still newbies at this.
Yeah,
right?
like, I need all of it.
I go to bed wanting to cry, but
way too often, way too often, man. And I also feel like I have way too many IEP meetings in a year. I'm like, can I just like, why do I have to have more than one?
There's so many. It's so much. Anyways, well, thank you for tuning in, everyone. And again, we're so happy to have you guys here for season 2. Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Bitching and Bolusing Podcast, where we unpacked our unfiltered opinions and ideas. Be sure to connect with us on social media at Bitching and Bolusing for more unapologetic dissent against the mainstream parenting narrative. And for an extra gritty perspective and ad-free listening, become a Patreon subscriber. You can visit us at www.bitchingandbolusing.com for previous episodes, merch, and more.
Hey, incredible parents, I have a special message about the Recess Project. Imagine every child having the chance to play freely. The Recess Project is on a mission to transform school playgrounds into inclusive spaces for kids with disabilities. They work with schools and communities, fundraising to make school playgrounds more accessible. They're making a real impact, and you can be a part of it. Head to their website, therecessproject.org, to donate, and let's make recess accessible for all children. We're not just talking about it, we're actively supporting a cause that matters. So join us in backing the Recess Project and creating inclusive playgrounds, because every child deserves a playground where they can just be kids.